So today we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty tricky question. We're going on a quest to figure out the identity of Filipino philosophy. What even is it? We're going to use the incredible work of Dr. Emerita S. Quito as our guide to unpack its history, its challenges, and where it might be headed. Let's get into it. And, right out of the gate, we hit the biggest hurdle. If you ask someone, what is Filipino philosophy, you're not going to get a simple one-sentence answer. It's one of those questions that kind of forces you to take a step back and ask something even bigger, like what do we even mean when we say philosophy in the Philippines anyway? According to Quito, the only way to really get a handle on this is to see that we're talking about two very different things. On one hand, you've got academic philosophy, the formal, structured subject you'd study in a university. But on the other hand, there's this grassroots philosophy, this informal, lived set of beliefs, the collective spirit or Volksgeist of the people. And it's the tension between these two that really defines the whole situation. And that tension isn't just academic, it has real cultural weight. I mean, think about this. In the Philippines, the word for philosopher, pilosopo, is often not a compliment at all. It's usually a playful jab, right? You call someone a pilosopo when they just love to argue for the sake of arguing. Maybe they're a bit of a smart aleck. And that alone tells you something really deep about how complicated philosophy's place is in the popular mind. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to dive into that philosophy of the people, then we'll track the history of the academic side of things, which was largely a borrowed tradition. We'll look at why the discipline hit a kind of crisis point, and then finally we'll explore what it actually means to forge a truly Filipino philosophy. All right, first things first, let's talk about that informal philosophy. This is the stuff that isn't found in textbooks, but it's lived and breathed every single day. These are the core beliefs and attitudes that Quito beautifully calls the hidden springs of the Filipino mind. And maybe the most famous of these is bahala. Now, it's so easy for outsiders and even some locals to write this off as just being fatalistic or lazy, but it's way, way more nuanced than that. It's this deep-seated trust in a higher power, an acceptance of what's coming that's part profound faith and part a calm resignation to things you just can't control. Then you have gulong ng palad, which literally means the wheel of fortune. This is huge because it's not a linear view of life where you're always supposed to be climbing up. It's cyclical. Life has its good times and it has its bad times. And this creates this incredible, resilient kind of optimism, a belief that no matter how low you are, the wheel is always eventually going to turn back up again. Pakikisama is another big one. It's all about getting along and maintaining smooth relationships. It's this spirit of camaraderie, prioritizing the harmony of the whole group over your own individual desires or disagreements. It's kind of like a deep cultural instinct to not rock the boat, because keeping the peace in the community is what matters most. And that flows perfectly into the spirit of bayanihan. This is communal unity in its purest form. It's that powerful, almost automatic response to come together and help anyone in the community who needs it, no questions asked. It's a profound belief that we're all in this together. And finally, there's utang na loob, or internal debt. This is a really sacred social bond. It's this powerful idea that some favors, acts of kindness or help, have a value that you can't ever repay with money. It creates this lifelong, unspoken obligation of gratitude. It's a debt of the heart, not the wallet. Okay, so let's switch gears. We've been talking about the philosophy of the people, the grassroots stuff. Now we're going to flip the coin and look at the other side, the formal academic tradition of philosophy that was, for the most part, imported into the Philippines. This timeline gives you a really quick look at that history. You can see that formal philosophy has some seriously deep roots, going all the way back to the Spanish founding of the University of Santo Tomas in 1611. But look at the key moments of change, the creation of the American-style University of the Philippines, and then later, these curriculum changes after the war and during martial law that really started to squeeze philosophy out. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Before the war, you basically had two completely different models for teaching philosophy. At UST, which was deeply rooted in its Spanish Catholic history, the focus was on Thomism and the humanities. The goal was to create the Homo universalis, this well-rounded, universal person. But then you have UP, which followed the Anglo-American tradition, emphasizing logic, science, and practical outcomes. Two totally different philosophies about philosophy, right from the beginning. So, this brings us to a really critical moment in the story. By the time Quito was writing in the late 20th century, she saw a discipline that was really struggling. It was facing this perfect storm of challenges that was basically stopping it from growing and being relevant. Yeah, just look at these issues. They're systemic. Imagine trying to be a professor with a 30-hour-a-week teaching load. When are you possibly going to have the time or energy for groundbreaking research? Then you add in low pay that drives talent elsewhere, and a total reliance on English translations, which cuts you off from huge chunks of philosophical thought. It just created this intellectual bottleneck. And if all those internal problems weren't enough, there was also massive pressure from the outside. As Quito says so powerfully in this quote, new courses mandated by the government, things like the Constitution and tax reform, started demanding space in the university schedule. And what got cut to make room? Well, it was often the humanities, and philosophy got hit especially hard. It was literally being elbowed out. But the story doesn't end there in crisis. Quito's work isn't just about pointing out all the problems. It's also a call to action. It lays out a path forward, a way to finally bridge that gap between the grassroots worldview and the academic discipline, to forge something totally new and authentic. And this right here is the absolute key. Her point isn't that Filipino philosophy doesn't exist. It's that it's emerging. It's still being born. Cecito's brilliant insight is that the real job for Filipino thinkers is to take that rich, informal Volksgeist, all those concepts like bahala na and utang na loob, and start to analyze it, to give it structure, and to formalize it into a rigorous, unique philosophical tradition. And a huge piece of that puzzle, maybe the most important piece, is language. As Quito puts it so perfectly, the soul of a people is better expressed in a native language. How can you ever hope to build a truly authentic, homegrown philosophy if you're always doing it in a borrowed tongue? It has to be foundational. So in the end, Quito doesn't leave us with a neat little answer tied up in a bow. She leaves us with a challenge, but a really inspiring one. If Filipino philosophy is a story that's still being written, an ongoing project, then it makes us ask, what is our part to play in writing that next chapter?